Welcome to the Terrible Podcast with your hosts from SteelersDepot.com, where you can find all your latest and greatest Steelers news. It's Dave Bryan and Alex Kozora, always lit, talking Steelers. And now, here's Dave and Alex.
Welcome to the Terrible Podcast, Season 13, Episode 6. He's Dave Bryan. I'm Alex Kozora, SteelersDepot.com. Glad you guys are back with us here for this Monday. And Dave, call it Monday afternoon lights, I suppose. Pittsburgh Steelers announcing Monday morning they're going to move their Monday practice from St. Vincent College to Latrobe Memorial High School, where Friday night lights typically takes place. Did not happen this year, unfortunately, due to a severe storm that rolled through. And then on Saturday, the team did hold practice, but they held it back at Pittsburgh, a close practice at the UPMC Rooney Sports Complex. So it's been a little bit since we've seen the Pittsburgh Steelers. I'm excited to get back out there today.
Yeah, absolutely. It did give us a nice little respite, though, I think, as a staff overall. Obviously, much rather have to be covering the team. But, yeah, obviously, I know a lot of people disappointed that Friday Night Lights, essentially got, weather canceled there. And I know our own Dr. Melanie Friedlander was out there and Tim Rice was out there. I think David O was out there with you. And you didn't get to partake in, obviously, in any of that. And then the practice, what day would have been Saturday, happened over there at the UPMC Rooney Complex, and also first day kind of back in action that you'll be able to see them. And I know you'll be out there at Latrobe Memorial Stadium. I imagine that St. Vincent College is probably a soupy mess right now, huh?
I assume so, though. Pictures over the weekend look pretty bad. There's more rain coming today and the rest of the week. So I don't know when we'll be back at SVC. It may be a while. They have options, though. I think they're at Latrobe Memorial today. They could go to Greater Latrobe High School, which has a turf field. They've done that in the past. So we'll play it by ear. We'll be there, though. If it's public and available, we'll be there. Absolutely,
you will be. Okay, where would you like to start with? You had a lot of people in a tizzy, I guess you would say, because you posted, your updated kind of camp stats, if you will. And I think you got the masses kind of the feathers ruffled overall. So do you want to start with that and kind of, for the like the 117th time, we explain to everybody why you keep these stats, what you hope to garner from these stats, and what people should take away from these stats?
Sure. What I've always said is the camp stats are one piece of a large puzzle. I'm not beholden by them. I'm not ruled by them. I'm not going to shove them in your face and say, look at George Pickens' target rate. That means X, Y, and Z. It is one piece of a puzzle to provide context, to confirm either what we're seeing or to suggest that maybe what we're thinking about may be a little bit different than the reality of the situation, that maybe we're looking at things too narrowly, thinking about one or two moments and trying to apply that too broadly, and the stats are disagreeing with you. I think really the biggest thing stats do for me is provide that groundwork and then also provide a lot of context. Let me just give you one stat that kind of really, I think, shows why I do what I do, even though it seems a bit over the top. We talk about Kenny Pickett's progression week 1 to week 2. I've talked about it. Other reporters have talked about it. Kenny Pickett's discussed about how he's more comfortable now. What does that look like? If you compare his stats the first 4 practices to the second 4 practices that we attended, his stats are a lot better across the board. Completion percentage from 50% to 71.4%. A yards per attempt from 2.1 to 4.9. Yards per completion, 4.2 to 6.8. Touchdown interception ratio, 1 touchdown, 2 picks the first week, 3 touchdowns, 0 interceptions the second week. So a clear improvement across the board in each category. And so that is the context I talk about, being able to compare Pickett's first week versus the second week, or Mason Rudolph's numbers last year to this year. This year, the numbers are quite a bit better. That's what I care about. Those are the things that I can pull from, some of the contextual relative numbers. And to me, that is a great stat on Kenny Pickett that really helps tangibly show the improvement that I know he's made from that first to second week.
But all anybody can see is Mason Rudolph at the top. Right.
And well, here's the thing. I'll say it flat out. Just based on the first 2 weeks of camp, just solely on those two weeks, 8 practices, Mason Rudolph has been the best quarterback. And that is shown by me, the eye test, what I've talked about, and the stats show that he has been the best, most consistent quarterback.
So what this means is you think Mason Rudolph's going to be the starting quarterback in week 1, right?
Well, it means he'll be a Hall of Famer. He'll be following Ben's foot. No, I mean, yeah, I still think Trubisky's the favorite. I still think it would take a lot for that to change. It's possible, and there is still a battle there. And Trubisky is not locked down that spot, and he needs to play better, and hopefully that progression will come, getting back some of the top weapons. Kevin Dotson, Pat Fryermuth, Najee Harris, Chase Claypool certainly will not hurt. But just on its face, you ask me, Alex, who is the best quarterback of the 3 to start training camp? It has been Mason Rudolph.
Yeah, but Alex, all these guys don't play with equal competition. Equal, kind of peers on the offensive side of the ball. Kenny Pickett is handicapped because he's playing with a bunch of third stringers.
Yeah, I hear that a lot, and I understand that. I really, you can drive yourself crazy trying to think about, who you're playing with or against, because, Kenny Pickett may be playing against third stringers, but he's working with third stringers, and vice versa. He's throwing to third stringers, but the defense is third string. And again, the offense always has the advantage because quarterbacks can't get hit. You can extend the play for 8-9 seconds if you want to. You can take a would-be sack and just keep the play going and stuff like that. So I get that to a certain extent. I just try to focus on what the quarterbacks are actually doing as opposed to wrap myself into a pretzel thinking about what team you're running with, and they mix and match, and Pickett's gotten work with, second team and stuff like that. So I just try to focus on how is the quarterback performing. That's the best way I can evaluate those guys.
All right. Good explanation there. And, once again, it's something that you can look back at. You can look back to, because you've done this in the manner that you've done it for so long. You can look back at past training camps and see how certain quarterbacks may have progressed or regressed as they went along, and kind of have a good kind of threshold of what a good completion percentage is. Yeah, all past distances aren't the same, but for the most part, it all comes out in the wash, as I like to say, throughout a whole camp. Now, obviously, there were a couple practices in there that you didn't get to observe and all like that. But I think the main thing is that you try to be as consistent as possible, and have been over the years. And it just isn't like this is a one-off. And also, it's important while others are trying to read hard. People get really mad about this, Alex. I mean,
I know.
I mean, it's like, and I know why, because they have their favorite, they have their guy that they've told at the bar that this is going to be the guy and that this guy sucks. And whenever anything flies in the face, much like a Pro Football Focus grade, then that creates hell and havoc. Whereas people should be enjoying the process more and hoping to learn more from the process. Look, you still got 3 preseason games to go here. We're going to learn a lot more about these quarterbacks. And I understand why people get upset overall, but I think it's silly not to just look at it for what it is, which you've explained over and over and over again.
And I will, I'm sure, continue to explain over and over and over. If you hate the stats, if you hate, the yards and all that kind of stuff, fine. Let me give you an objective stat, quarterback reps, because to me, that's a really important one. How are the snaps being divvied up? That was going to be one of Pittsburgh's biggest obstacles during the offseason. Mitch Trubisky, 140, Mason Rudolph, 125, Kenny Pickett, 110. So pretty even across the board. Obviously, it's going Trubisky, Rudolph, Pickett in terms of the volume of snaps. Trubisky, Rudolph getting the 2-minute drill work kind of up their numbers a little bit, but it's been pretty even across the board. And so again, people talk about, I had one commenter the other day say, Kenny Pickett's not getting enough reps to prove he can compete. He's getting plenty of reps. He's getting more than enough reps to show what he can do. Now, is it with the starters on the first team? No, but there's still reps nonetheless overall, which is kind of the most important thing. So the reps battle has been pretty close.
All right. Anything other outside of the quarterback stats that you'd kind of like to highlight here?
Anthony McFarland, typically yards per carry and yardage on the ground doesn't look very good in camp. A lot of guys hover around 3.5, 3.3 yards per carry. That's kind of common just with the way the camp is kind of created. But McFarland's average is about 3.9. I think over the last couple of days, it's been even better than that. So he's going to run consistently, getting work in that pony personnel groupings to get him on the field with another running back has kind of helped his snap count overall. Jaylen Warren with the 19 carries throughout camp, that's second most. And so, again, a lot of opportunity there for Jaylen Warren. And then with the receivers, talk about the rookies, and I get that, no Deontay Johnson for most of this thing, no Chase Claypool for the vast majority of this training camp time, but George Pickens leads the team in receptions and targets, tied for the lead in touchdowns, and Calvin Austin leads in yards with 160. And so Steelers rookie certainly being as advertised their first 2 weeks of training camp.
That certainly is exciting. And boy, I stuck my head in one of those. I have never done the audio version of one of those Twitter spaces, and you think, man, as much as I am on Twitter, how the hell have you not done that? But I have listened to a few of them. I have not participated in any of them. And Lewis Grove, Lewis Grove does one occasionally on there, and he was doing one late last night, and I decided to jump in and in with that. And they were asking me who I'm kind of most excited to see, and during preseason, and how can it not be these rookies? And by the way, shout out to Lewis Grove. I think his son passed away. So condolences to him, a longtime supporter
Definitely.
of the site and all like that. But when it comes to preseason, I don't see how the rookies can't be and it's like that every year, right? The rookies are at the top of the list of guys kind of excited to see during the preseason, and especially preseason game number one, because, how much are we going to, we might see some of Deontay and Claypool, assuming he's healthy, because of having a new quarterback in Mitch Trubisky, but if those guys do play, it's probably only going to be for a series or two, and then we're going to see, I think, a whole lot of guys like obviously like George Pickens and Calvin Austin III. So that's going to be exciting in and of itself. And so far, it sounds like Pickens and Calvin Austin are kind of living up to the pre-training camp hype, right?
They are, especially when the pads came on. They continued to play well. Austin, I think, has really made some splash plays since. Maybe Pickens a little bit quieter than how he started, but still good overall. It's really, though, to me, with the receiver position, and I'm not saying I'm concerned about this with either guy, but it's how can you finish? So many receivers start camp hot. There's been so many camp darlings at that position and names that are forgotten, like Rico Bussey and Damon Patterson. I'm not calling, Pickens or Austin, either of those guys, but it's really, can you get through that finish line? I think about a Tyler Vaughn, who's had a good start to training camp. Can you run through the tape at the end? Receivers a position where guys shine bright early and then kind of fade late the most. And so that's the fate that those guys have to avoid. But certainly everything so far, generally speaking, on Pickens and Austin has been really positive. It just, can you continue to do that the rest of the month? If you can, then you really have something special there.
Okay, you nerd. You got anything else to add?
That's why you're here. If you're listening to this, you're a nerd like me.
Look, people have listened to this show long enough, and if you're new, you're either gonna like it right out of the chute, or you're gonna hate it because of my stuttering and the nerdness that goes along with it. So we don't try to cater to anything, and never have, during this show, you're moving forward here. But this is what Alex does at this time of the year. This is why a lot of people get excited about what Alex does. And, unfortunately, we have to keep explaining and having Alex, provide the context of why he does what he does. And that will be done again on Monday at Latrobe Memorial Stadium there. So anything else to add? Wrap it up, that portion of it?
Yeah, that's about it. Connor Hayward's been targeted quite a bit, not as efficient and coming down with catches and, some missed opportunities there. But that was an interesting note. I know Matt Canada talked about the versatility that he brings, but that was really it overall. So to make mention of the injury report, obviously we don't have a full list based on the last practice Saturday, but it brought me back to my pro day tracker days. They're trying to watch a little bit of footage there that they did show from Saturday's practice and very early warm-up beginning kind of session work, and some really good news that we were able to spot with Cam Sutton being in full pads that day. We don't know exactly the extent of which he worked, but we assume if he's in full pads, that's a really good sign. And then Mike Tomlin said afterwards the injury is not serious at all. So he's good to go. There was certainly some concern there after leaving Thursday's practice with a lower body type injury that he may miss some time. And he seems to be missing 0 time, which is excellent news.
And and obviously the team is not signed an outside corner yet, so that's another great sign there. So we'll wait and see what you have to report as far as maybe a participation level with him later on today. And Mike Tomlin continually said, I think at the end of the practice the other day, a lot of these guys that have been day to day are working themselves back, yada yada. So we'll just have to wait and see. Maybe if a Claypool's able to get out there, I think he actually had pads on the other day. Don't know the level of participation that he had in that Saturday practice, but it does kind of feel like that once you got past this Sunday day off, that maybe we'd start seeing a couple of these guys getting back to work here on Monday.
Yeah, and we'll have to see, but it looks promising for Chase Claypool, for Pat Frymuth. We'll see if Najee Harris, I wouldn't expect him to practice in full today, but maybe doing some more stuff on the side, some conditioning type work. I think Najee discussed that he'll have to do some of that stuff to get his body back into shape after, kind of returning to action. And I just happened to, this is random, so I apologize for interrupting, but I just saw Warren Sharp again talking about Derek Watt's cap hit. I don't know why he continues to do that, but
because it's an easy target and it gets you a lot of clicks that way. If that guy would stick to kind of the stuff that's in his books and all like that, the deeper dive kind of stats, he'd be fine. And I just don't understand why people want to attack the cap numbers, especially on when you're talking about a player that had his contract restructured. Of course, his cap numbers is going to be higher there. So go ahead.
I'm sorry, that was my fault.
You dip your toe into the cap water over here, and you're going to get a response.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I almost want this team to cut Derek Watt just so I can stop seeing that stupid stat. But anyway. But yeah, from an injury standpoint, we'll see some other, minor bumps and bruises and stuff like that. But those are the big names there. There's teams working towards good health. Miles Killebrew even seemingly on a track to return sometime within, I would say, the next week. Marcus Allen, I will say, that hamstring better get healthy pretty quick. There's a lot of competition at inside linebacker. My guess is because hamstring injuries take longer than you think to come back from, he's probably still a week plus away, in danger of missing that first preseason game. So that's not great news for him, as UG3, as Mark Robinson, even Buddy Johnson a little bit continued or kind of starts showing up in my notes some. So, Marcus Allen better get healthy soon.
You look at guys kind of on that fringe, if you will, and guys with higher salaries at that. You got two in Marcus Allen and Miles Boykin, each earning set to earn $2.54 million. That's, they better be able to do a lot during the preseason and do it well, and they better be able to help out on special teams on top of it. Now, obviously, Marcus Allen's been up back material, and Miles Boykin has a little bit of special team stuff in their resume. But if you want to look at kind of the midway point of camp right now, and guys that better get back on the field and start shining when the lights come on in these preseason stadiums, probably Marcus Allen and Miles Boykin are two. Obviously there's a lot of guys that need to do that, but are very, very visible because of their salaries and spot on the roster right now.
Let me ask you this. I understand you haven't been at practice. You're kind of relying off of me, but from just what you thought, before camp began and what you've heard and read about since camp began, which player has the better chance to make the roster right now, Miles Boykin or Marcus Allen?
I tell you, I'm not convinced either will right now.
Okay. Well, if you had to say that one makes it, if you had to guess.
Oh man, just because he is stuck and has been that up back and kind of a four teams guy, I would say Marcus Allen.
Okay. But you believe that it's plausible that neither make it?
I think, I'm not out there, obviously,
Right.
and my real evaluations don't start until the first preseason game. Now, I do use you quite a bit as a filter, and what I use your reports for gives me things to kind of look for once the preseason starts, and where I expect players to be, what group, and those kind of things there. I mean, it is kind of hard to draw hard conclusions from, someone else's information there, but that's what I'm left to do. And then obviously I mix in, kind of obvious things and roster construction and cap charges and those kind of things. And that's why I've come to the conclusion that, it's very, very plausible that both those guys don't make it, especially when you talk about, man, what the big battle there is and all these bodies battling for the backup inside linebacker job. And when you consider, is this team going to keep a 6 wide receiver, and what's that 6? And if so, what's that 6 wide receiver look like overall, especially when it's easy to go through and pick out 5 other guys that you're pretty sure are going to be on the roster, barring injury.
I think it's a really good battle for that 6 receiver spot between Anthony Miller and Miles Boykin. And it's close. I don't know who. I think I would give the edge right now to Anthony Miller, but that's one of those things that probably goes down to the wire. And similar can be said about the inside linebacker battle, where, I think what you do inside a stadium, because it's so close in camp, really will separate that group.
Sure, and a lot of jobs will be won and lost once the lights come on,
Right.
But I think looking at the overall thing, and especially with Marcus Allen, who's been, let's face it, Marcus Allen's been a fringe kind of player every year. You kind of go into camps kind of wondering, is this guy going to be on the 53, right?
Sure, he's been a bubble guy. He made it he make it his first year, he got hurt, and then his second year he got put on the practice squad, and then has kind of found some stability the last 2 years or so. But one of those guys that's always fighting for that job, and if you get hurt and other guys are playing well and the other guys are cheaper, which they are, Mark Robinson's cheaper than Marcus Allen, that might squeeze you out. So you have to really fight and scratch and claw every single year.
Let me turn to how the turntables. From what you have seen so far, and knowing how this team is health wise, and obviously your next 53-man roster predictions coming out along with mine after the first preseason game, who of Miles Boykin and Marcus Allen make or don't make the 53-man roster?
Yeah, I think it's a really tough question, so I'm mad that you turned it back on me, because I was trying to put it on you.
Because you've got the eyes out there,
Right. That's really close. If I had to guess right now, and this is just as we see it today, and again, it's close in all the qualifiers, I would say that Boykin does not make it, and Marcus Allen still makes it, because I think there's enough experience and provenness in Allen that gets him on the roster.
Okay, fair enough. All right, where to now?
Where are we at now, Dave? Let's see. You kind of separately from training camp, with a couple of days off that we've had, you did a little look towards 2023 and some potential contract extensions. This offseason's been a busy one for Steelers getting new deals with Minka Fitzpatrick back in June, Chris Boswell and Deontay Johnson getting them since camp started. Probably less obvious candidates for next year, but you outlined 3 names that, if they have good 2022 seasons, could get a big payday in 2023.
Yeah, and this is just an overall 30,000-foot look at guys that could legitimately probably be in line for potential lucrative contract extensions. These are only guys that will be entering their final year of their rookie, of their current contract, rookie contract next offseason. So that throws, a lot of people say, well, what about this guy? What about that guy? Well, those a lot of these names that people are throwing out, those players' contracts expire after this season. I'm looking at legitimate kind of contract extension guys like we have seen with obviously this offseason with Minka Fitzpatrick, with Boswell, and obviously with Deontay Johnson. And really, the list starts and, in my opinion, stops with, there's not many candidates overall, period. But, with members of the 2020 draft class and in Chase Claypool, Alex Highsmith, and Kevin Dotson. Now, what are the odds that all three of these guys wind up being in lucrative contract extension talks next summer? Very low, right? I mean, if we are talking about all three of them, a year, going into next summer ahead of training camp, then those guys, then it's probably been a very good season for the Steelers. It's obviously something that you root for. Chase Claypool, he the first 2 years leaves you wanting a little bit more. He needs to win more vertically. He needs to get back to kind of being that combat catcher that he was, part of his rookie season, and obviously during his career at Notre Dame. We'll have to see how much of a slot role he plays in 2022. If he does, that should give him more opportunities to run after the catch, have a little bit shorter depth of target, if you will. So it's going to be interesting to see how that plays. In my view, Alex, he needs somewhere in the neighborhood of like 80 receptions and around 1,000 yards receiving in 2022 to firmly put himself in position for us to say, could this be a guy that is pushing for, let's say, top 20 wide receiver salary? If he doesn't get to that spot, then I think you look at him as a guy that, we need to see it again in your final season here, and then kind of make a decision after 2023. As I sit here right now, this far out, my prediction would be that Chase Claypool will not get a contract extension from the Steelers next summer.
Yeah, I think that's where I'm at right now. I think he has to prove that he's earned that. Is it possible that he does? Sure. I think he could have a big bounce back year, but you just paid Deontay, and Claypool's in that one good year, one not so good year, one year where you kind of felt like it was, leaving you wanting more. Do you think the move to the slot has a chance to increase his overall production or decrease it? You have the thought of, if you're the Z receiver, you have the best chance to make the big downfield plays, but if you're in the slot, your volume may be a bit higher. You're going to catch more passes, probably overall, be more consistently involved in the offense. Do you think his production overall goes up or goes down if he's going to be a largely slot receiver at 11 personnel?
Yeah, and here's the thing. I'm not so sure, even if he does see an uptick in slot snaps, that it's going to be into the 70-80% range. I think you could kind of see a mix and match with him. Sure. But overall, I think it gives him the better chance of upping his catch numbers, because look, your reception percentage, your catch percentage, the further you get away from the line of scrimmage is probably going to suffer, correct?
Correct.
All right. So if he has a chance to catch more passes, let's say 8 to 12 yard variety, that's probably going to result in him making more catches. So the more he plays in the slot, I think could potentially impact his catch numbers. And then what he does with those catches, those shorter light catches after the catch, will go a long way and potentially determine if he can reach that 1,000-yard mark.
Right. I mean, his overall catches should go up. His yards per catch should go down a bit if you're going to play more in the slot. So you balance that and say which is going to be more productive and conducive to that long-term deal overall. But of course, if he just flat out plays well, regardless if he's playing inside, outside, that's going to be the biggest component. I think, and obviously still, 12 personnel, 21 personnel, 2 receiver sets. Claypool will continue to be the Z. And of course, even in some 11 personnel, he'll be the Z. They'll rotate in Calvin and, Pickens could play inside, et cetera, et cetera. But I do think to start the year, at least. And I want to see how it looks a little bit more when everyone gets healthy, when Claypool's officially back and Deontay and team. Those guys have yet to have a day where they practice together in full. But I think it'll be Claypool as the slot receiver, Pickens as the Z, Deontay as the X. Is kind of your loose way to define the 11 personnel. You
agree, though, that he has to be around 80 receptions, around 1,000 yards in 2022 for us to go into next offseason talking about, I wonder if they'll extend Chase Claypool.
Yeah, I think that's a good target to have overall, at least 1,000 yards. If he gets 1,000 yards on 70 catches, that's still probably good because it means you're just making more big plays downfield. So it's probably around there. But obviously just the eye test of, were you more consistent? Did you make more plays? Were you a reliable option in the slot? If Claypool really is going to play inside more, can you win some of those more contested situations downfield? Has your blocking improved? Frisman Jackson really emphasizing blocking this year, which I really love to see. All of those things will really determine whether or not he gets a new deal.
Correct. All right. Alex Highsmith is the second name on the list. I personally feel that of the three guys, Chase Claypool, Alex Highsmith, and Kevin Dotson, that as we sit here basically a year out, I feel like Highsmith might have the best chance overall of the three to find himself signing some sort of, and maybe not super lucrative extension, but some sort of extension next offseason. Because look, he's first 2 years, he's made progression in each of those 2 years. This is the year where everybody's starting to hear double-digit sacks with Alex Highsmith. He has the potential to do that. I think if that front stays healthy, look, you got to pick your poison up there, man. If these guys stay healthy, Watt, Larry Ogunjobi, obviously Cam Hayward, those kind of things. I think Alex Highsmith's going to find himself in a lot of what I like to say tasty situations against some left tackles. There are going to be some one-on-one battles that they're going to want and need him to win. And if he does, and he does it consistently throughout the season, there's a chance we could be talking about this guy with 10, 11, 12 sacks. And if he does do that, or maybe the sacks are around 8 or so, but we're saying, man, what about his pass rush pressure percentage? He's not the one getting them down to the ground, but he sure is wrecking havoc down there. If that part of the eye test is there, then I think potentially we could be looking at this guy, sign an extension next offseason. Now, you could get in a situation with him also that you say, all right, he was that guy in 2022. We want to see it again. And if he does do it again, hey, we'll throw the tag on him, after the 2023 season. But I think of these three guys, Claypool, Highsmith, and Kevin Dotson, I think Highsmith has the best chance, from as we sit here from right today, of being that guy, and maybe the only guy that signs an extension next offseason.
Yeah, I think as we see here today, he's the most likely name to get that extension. You do want to see the production be more consistent overall, him finish some plays a bit more, but the talent's there. He's progressed, as you said. He got healthy the back end of last year, and his production went up because of it. 4 sacks over his last 4 games, including the wild card loss. So, yeah, again, the question, and we discussed this before, is what's he worth? What's that value on, let's say, an 8 to 9 sack season that he ends with this year? It's hard to exactly peg that number.
It really is. But on the flip side, he's got to think what's best for his future as well. I mean, and I think we kind of addressed this not too long ago. You've got guys like, I don't know, Zadarius Smith earning $14 million per season. Ngakwe, $13 million with the Colts right now. I mean, these are guys that are well outside of the top 20, right? So you even have Jadeveon Clowney, $10 million per season. I know that's based more off of what his past was more than what his future is. But can you get a guy like Alex Highsmith, if he gets in that 9-10 sack range? Is it unthinkable to get Highsmith into at least that, I don't know, $13-14 million range. And that's the price tag right now. And if you're comfortable with him, because this team did not obviously draft an outside linebacker this past year, right?
Right. And
even if they were to draft an outside linebacker next year, if they drafted one early, the writing's on the wall right there. But if they don't, and it's a byproduct of looking at Highsmith and what he could potentially become, then I think you get into serious discussions about what can we sign this guy for, maybe on like a 3-year deal, something around along those lines. And I think $13 million would be at least the floor, I would think, at this point.
I guess, and I'm just thinking out loud here, and maybe I'm kind of meandering, so apologize in advance. But obviously, this team didn't pay Bud Dupree. They could have. They knew they were going to pay TJ Watt. Bud got 16.5. Obviously, Highsmith would have to be under that, you would think. Or does the fact that the cap went up and B, there's no quarterback to pay anymore, does that potentially make you more willing and able to pay another outside linebacker at a premium type cost?
Yeah, and look, we talked not too long ago about, okay, what if Deontay gets done or doesn't get done? Okay, regardless, moving past this offseason, who are the guys most likely to be the next? And I had a terrible take about this last week. Who are the most likely players that you're going to pay before you pay the quarterback? And the list is short. I mean, it very well, if it's not a guy like, let's say, Claypool or one of these three, I mean, odds are good that it's at most going to be one of these three getting paid next offseason, right?
I would hope so. If not, then it probably wasn't a great season for them or for this team.
I mean, you could get in a situation where all three of them were sitting there talking about it. But the reality of the fact is probably at most one of these three gets paid next summer. And that's not even guaranteed.
Mm-hmm. Right. But just to Highsmith, to the number, how do you balance that between what Bud wanted and what you weren't willing to pay versus what you may be willing to pay now?
Once again, I think the floor, assuming he comes close, everything passes the sniff test and all like that, I think the floor is $13 million.
I get that.
And that's the floor. I think maybe realistically, let's say he has 10 sacks, he stays healthy, he takes that next step. I think you could be looking more along lines, I don't know, 15 million, Alex, really.
Right. Which is almost what Bud got in Tennessee. Right. So, I mean, would the team be willing to pay that? Obviously different regime.
I think so. If they think he's the guy, he just turned 25 on Sunday.
Right. It's just a lot of money allocated, to those two players.
Sure. But you don't have the quarterback. You're not going to do a lot of probably money allocating overall until at least Freiermuth is up next, and then the quarterback's going to still be a year, at earliest a year after that.
I'm just thinking out loud, but I'll use the words you always use. Is that position almost a little fungible? You found Bud Dupree. I mean, you spent a first-round pick on him.
Edge rusher? Oh, bite your tongue.
I mean, just saying from what Pittsburgh has done in terms of being able to replace Bud Dupree fairly seamlessly with Alex Highsmith, a third-round pick. I mean, Pittsburgh seems to have a good knack and a really good coach in Carl Dunbar. Obviously, I would love to have Alex Highsmith, but if it's a question of, paying him a high price and investing a lot in that position versus maybe something else, you could do both. I'm talking out loud here.
Bill Parcells would be sending you to your room without supper right now.
Probably would.
Bite your tongue. You give me a guy that can put the quarterback down on the ground. You give me three of them. I'll pay all three of them. That way. That's the kind of thing that I don't think that you can take for granted. Now, look.
Right. But when Bud left, we said, how they get to replace him, and they replaced Bud pretty quickly and pretty easily.
Sure, and in fact, you could argue that Highsmith's progression 2 years into his career was ahead of what Bud's was.
Right. Well, he was healthier, but yeah, I agree.
Right. All right. Yeah. Now,
my point is Pittsburgh has always had good pass rushers. They've always found good pass rushers. They've never not had good pass rushers on the edge.
But why let something that is good get away? And
I understand. Right.
You know?
But that goes back to like the receiver fungibility or the running back fungibility. How could you let Le'Veon Bell walk? Well, we'll find some replacements.
Look, they were more up against the cap. I believe that they would have really tried, and I believe that they did make some sort of offer. I just think Bud thought he was, worth more. Right. If they could have kept Bud, I think they would have tried to keep Bud. But man, you give me the bird in the hand, man.
No, usually I'm with you. I agree. But I also think Pittsburgh's scheme really helps these guys too. There's a reason, and I know that the injury plays a role, but there's a reason why Bud wasn't as successful last year in Tennessee. The way that Pittsburgh is able to scheme up their pass rushers with stunts and games and twists really has helped those guys. So again, I think Alex Highsmith's a really good player. I'm super excited for him this year. I just wonder how the team is going to balance. Do you pay Highsmith a pretty fair penny while also making TJ Watt, one of the highest paid defensive players in football?
All right, but getting back to it, I mean, this is a very important season for Alex Highsmith because this season will let us know. I mean, the eye test alone. Oh, look, he's this is a dude now. This is a guy that can get after the quarterback right now. And if that's the talk after the 2022 season, then this team might not have to spend an early round draft pick on an edge rusher. And if they don't have to spend a first or second, round draft pick on another edge rusher or even third, then you have to wonder what they think about this guy's prospects long term there. Now, look, he could even have a nice season. They say, do it again, and then we'll potentially pay you,
Right. Sure.
And all like that. I just think, going back to the overall topic and the subject of the post was trying to pick out the guys that are the most likely candidates to get extensions next year. And of the three, Claypool, Highsmith, and Dotson, personally, I think Highsmith is currently in the best spot to be the one of the three next offseason.
I agree. What is the number one thing Alex Highsmith has to do this year to have that big breakout season? To me, what do you think he really has to do above all else?
Perfect his main move, and then continue to build counters off of that in the scoring.
I agree. I think the pass rush plan has to be a bit more focused, and then just flat out finishing the play. When you get the opportunity, you better finish that sack or finish that tackle for loss, and make sure you're not missing, and being on time. Being very consistent.
The late Kevin Green, some of the stuff that he talked about in some of those videos. If you've got one good pass rush move, you can build off of everything else, Mm-hmm. And I think that's what this year has to be for Alex Highsmith. This is my main move, and here are counters that I can build off of that. And if he does that and continues to progress against the run, look, and I don't want to say that there's no more excuses because he hasn't made excuses, but the progression's been nice that everybody's expecting that next jump for him.
Right. Getting 6 to 7 sacks will not get you paid the way that you want to get paid. And I know sacks are just one number, but they are the number that rules, how much you get paid off the edge. So from that pass rush plan, mentioned this before, he develops, it has 3 moves essentially. That outside speed rush, you can kind of call the rip, long or ghost, whatever he wants to do there. The bull rush / long arm, and then the inside spin for him has been incredibly effective and a great inside counter and go-to there when tackles cheat and overset. Those are the 3 moves. He does those at a high level. He'll get his 10 sacks, and he'll probably get a ton of money next summer.
And look, as we've said too, I mean, if this front stays healthy, TJ Watt's going to get a lot of attention, right? And so is Cameron Hayward. And if Larry Ogunjobi's that guy that we left off with seeing on the field against the Raiders late last season, that front's going to be a handful. And Alex Highsmith's going to be the big winner in situations where they say, we got you singled up, go win it,
And Highsmith gets to play with Kim Hayward, which on its face, you understand Hayward's going to draw attention from centers and guards and stuff like that. But Hayward is the king at being able to master the art of the subtle hold on those stunts and games and twists. Bud Dupree got so many free pressures and free runs at the quarterback because they would run a twist with Hayward being the looper. And as he loops to the outside, he'll suddenly pull and grab the guard's jersey so he can't come back inside as Highsmith or the right outside linebacker, but Dupree would crash inside. And so when you play with Cam Hayward, you get a lot more free pressures because Hayward's so darn good. I love watching it. Him being able to just suddenly hold, they'll never call it, they'll never see it, but grab that jersey of the guard. So he's just a tick late getting back inside on those games. That right outside linebacker gets to rush in free so often.
A king crasher, if you will.
There we go.
All right, Kevin Dotson. I first and foremost, this is a guy that's got to stay on the field. This is a guy that's had to kind of work on transitioning to the left guard position from right guard in college. He's got to put it all together for one full season. He has got to come out of 2022 with us saying, you know what, Alex, the unquestioned best offensive lineman the Steelers had in 2022 was Kevin Dotson. If we're saying that after the 2022 season, then there's a chance that maybe there's some extension talks. But with the guard market on top of it, being a little bit, obviously not what some of the other positions are, as good of a season that he might have, it still might not be enough for the Steelers to say, we want to see you do it in your final year of your contract. Mm-hmm. And if you're that same dude, then we'll franchise tag you and work on a deal after that.
That was my thought. If you see it this year, you're still going to be a little hesitant. Is that a 1-year thing? Is that what you're going to be for the next 3, 4, 5 seasons? I think unless he has just an incredible season, I think it's something we sit there and say, that's good. I want to see you do it one more year to prove you're consistent.
All right. We talked about all three of these guys, and it's a year out right now. Let's make predictions. Any of these three guys sign let's say a top 25 average yearly value extension next summer?
I think my answer is pretty boring, but I'll say Highsmith does, Claypool and Dotson do not.
I'll say none of the three do.
Ooh,
I'll be
why no on Highsmith? I was on the other side of that for half the time.
I know. I built it all up there, but I just think that they're going to get in a position where they saw just enough that they want to see it again. And then I hope I'm wrong in this. I think of the three, I think Highsmith has the best opportunity to be that guy. But I'm going to go with the even more boring and say none of these three sign a top 25 extension next summer.
Okay, fair enough. I get that. Yeah, we'll see. But good conversation to have. Good look next year. Obviously, next offseason, probably not as exciting as this offseason with all the big guys getting paid there. But, somebody could still get paid, and who knows what the landscape will look like a year from now. Maybe we're talking about somebody else that we're not thinking about right now that's in line to get paid.
All right. We got some mileage out of that post, didn't we?
I figured we hadn't gone down a rabbit hole yet in the podcast, so I wanted to take you down one there. Speaking of terrible takes, just real quickly here, my terrible take today is on the quarterback situation, not on Mitch Trubisky, not on Mason Rudolph, not on Kenny Pickett. It's on Chris Oladokun. And I've talked about him a little bit. I'm really upset this team drafted him. I don't understand why they did. That's the whole premise of the terrible take. I know they needed a fourth quarterback. They did not need to draft a fourth quarterback. They knew that guy basically had no path for playtime, barring any sort of injury. Now, I don't know how you can justify spending a 7th-round pick on a guy who literally did not play. Imagine if you drafted a cornerback and knew you were not going to play him a single snap during training camp. This guy, Oladokun, can't even play in a stadium right now because he's not gotten the rep in practice. You can't put that guy in a stadium, even for a fourth quarter drive for the last 2 series. You can't do that to him. So I don't understand why. And I know it's a 7th-round pick and people are going to say that, but every draft pick is valuable. You only get a couple of those each year. You better make them count and give yourself the best chance to hit. And burning that on a quarterback who literally is just sitting there is, to me, just poor draft management.
We said going into training camp, how the heck are they going to try to get this kid some snaps, even 5 of them, because you don't have the aspect of the bin schedule, like it's been. And I definitely see where you're coming. I mean, from How many snaps does he have to start? How many snaps do you foresee him getting? You're saying you don't think he's going to get any against the Seahawks, right?
No, how could you give him one? He hasn't gotten one in a practice in Latrobe and standing next to his offensive coordinator. How are you going to put this guy inside a stadium as your first snaps and say, go run it, dude? Like, how could you do that to a guy?
I mean, even the last series of maybe the game?
No. Unless he's just going to hand the ball off 3 straight times or knee it down. The guy hasn't done anything. I mean, that'd be like literally taking you, Dave, and just put you in a stadium. Here's a helmet. Go try it. Have fun.
Going to be interesting to see how this comes out in the wash because you got to feel for the kid. They keep telling him to take mental reps. He gets
a lot of mental reps.
He gets 0 regular reps to go along with it. We'll see how the first preseason game rolls out here. But I mean, how many teams would have drafted this kid anyway? 2? Maybe.
Well, maybe, but they would not have signed him as an undrafted free agent. And I've said this before because the signing bonus, he would have gotten, half a partial base salary guarantee from some other team. He had definitely a lot of interest in the pre-draft process, and Pittsburgh's not going to compete with that. So that's the sole reason why they drafted him. I said 2 things. I said, A, this team's going to draft 2 quarterbacks, and B, I'm not going to like they're going to draft 2 quarterbacks. And that's what's happened because Old Oaken just has no path. I mean, you draft anything else, a corner, a pass rusher, a running back, I don't care. And they're going to at least compete and get snaps and be in the mix and contribute to your team in some way. And the 4th quarterback is not.
Right. You got to feel for the kid for sure.
And maybe someone gets hurt and that opens up a path there, but it's not something you root for and can expect.
As I always like to say, these things always have a weird way of working themselves out. I'm not convinced it will in this situation, right. But we'll see if they trade Rudolph or not.
I really don't think they are. I really don't. Maybe if something really good comes along, but it's not like you can sit there and say, well, Old Oaken looks pretty good. So maybe we're more comfortable moving Rudolph and still having, the strength of being in that room. I know it's a minor thing and people will yell. I mean, do you buy the whole, it's just a 7th round pick? Is that something that resonates with you? Or are you kind of on my side of, I don't think that argument holds water?
Brett Kiesel.
There you go. Kelvin Beachum. Kind of examples there.
You could go down the list. I'd rather take a shot at a position that I know at least has somewhat of a chance. Now, had they not drafted a quarterback in the first round, then then you could understand it a little bit more. But mostly 7th round picks are kind of throwaways. But I mean sometimes you get guys that at least can get out there and give you 250 snaps in special teams play.
Tyler Medikevich, great 7th round pick. Perfect.
Right.
I mean, 7th round picks, the odds of hitting are slim, but when you draft a 4th quarterback, you reduce those odds to 0. Why would you willingly invest a draft pick in a guy that just has 0 chance overall? And again, you needed a 4th quarterback. I get that. They always carry 4. Go sign an undrafted guy. Go sign a veteran quarterback for the veteran minimum. That's fine. You're not burning draft capital there. I don't care if you bring in a Bart Houston and he just sits on the bench, and that's fine, but not a draft pick. And as you said, not that anyone cares about fairness in the NFL, but that's just unfair to Old Oaken that he gets just literally 0 shot. Even in 7-on-7, he can't get a rep. You can't give him 1 rep. I mean, come on.
All right, let's not give away your complete terrible take, which you already did.
That's fine.
If you're listening, still listen to Alex's terrible take on Chris Oladokun later today.
Yeah, the winning lotto numbers are in there too, so they're not.
There you go.
What else? Okay, I don't know what else we have. I think that's probably about it overall. What about any of the interviews that happened? I mean, still on Sirius, the one part of Friday Night Lights were the fact that you had the Sirius interviews with Jim Miller, Pat Kerwin, moving the chains on Sirius. Anything that those interviews said with what TJ Watt, I think, and Matt Canada, anything that caught your attention there?
I don't think as a whole, no. I mean, that they are obviously worth listening to, and we write about them. My biggest takeaway with a lot of these interviews, a lot of people are happy with Zach Gentry.
Okay.
And that's something that we've mentioned several times. Look, a year ago, about the same time, I was really wondering if Zach Gentry was going to stick around, and boy, has he. And I think that's kind of one takeaway. I'm trying to trying to remember much of anything else that have come out of some of these other interviews. You get so many audio at this time of year. No, I wouldn't say there's anything that hugely has caught my eye overall just yet.
Okay. Yeah, but they still did a really good job. Obviously, Jim Miller, Pat Kerwin, and just having the access to some of those players, I think is. I will kind of circle back to something I mentioned before, and Calvin Austin spoke about that after Saturday's practice. And we wrote about that even before Austin's comments, that the emphasis Frisman Jackson, the new receivers coach, has on run blocking. I think that's a really important thing. There was such a lack there in the run game last year for a variety of reasons, but also especially because of the poor receiver blocking. Tyler Wise has pointed it out time and time again in his film rooms last year. So I'm really happy to see Frizz Jackson not just pay lip service to run blocking, but really emphasize that in his team's daily drills and work.
All right, real quick, highlight for us 3 unheralded Steelers off to solid training camp start so far.
Sure. Tyler Vaughn, Delonte Scott, and Mark Robinson. I get Robinson's a little bit more heralded, I guess you could say, because he's a draft pick. I've talked about him a bit, but Vaughn's has quietly had a good camp. The last 4 practices publicly for him have been really strong overall. He's not a good, didn't test as a great athlete, but good body control, good tracking in the football, played primarily on the outside. And Delonte Scott has just stacked good days. He's been consistent. It's not about just having one good day. He's winning as a pass rusher, winning in terms of getting off blocks in the run game, batting down passes. Where does he fit in that outside linebacker battle? It's still tough to tell. I think that group overall has done well, but I think Scott has been a guy that's kind of consistently stepped up day after day.
Okay.
All right, Dave, you want to get to some reader emails and close out today's show?
Let's do it. Let's start here with Finn. Let's see. Finn from Dublin, Ireland. How about that? Have been a big fan for quite some time now. My first episodes were around Alex's first camp update, so it's nice going full circle here. He says, if Rudolph continues to stand out as the best, at least statistically, do you think that has given him a better chance to start or to be traded? If he is the best, then he should start, but also it will improve his trade value. Thanks for everything you guys do and keep up the good work. All right. What answer Finn's question from Dublin, Ireland about Mason Rudolph, Alex?
Yeah, it's interesting. If he's the best quarterback there, is that the whole evaluation process? I mean, you paid Trubisky a lot of money with the expectation to start, and the Steelers are not immune of looking at those numbers and the investment and saying, we're going to see what we have in Trubisky, even if Rudolph, technically is the best player during training camp. Does it increase his trade value? I mean, it would if he does well. What he's doing right now in camp is not increasing his trade values. No one's able to see that kind of stuff. But if he does that inside a stadium, it may. But I still think he's most likely to be in Pittsburgh come week 1. And I still think Trubisky is the favorite today. But it is fair to say that Rudolph has, pushed him, and it continues to push Trubisky, and this battle is not over.
All right, we got somebody angry with us about Hines Ward again, Alex.
Oh, what did we even say about Hines Ward? We talk about Hines Ward.
All right, from Jay Smith writes in, really glad to see from Alex reporting that the coach Jackson is actively trying to improve the unit's run blocking. However, shocked that Alex noticed, since he seems to put no stock into it as well as you, Dave. At least you two's take on Hines Ward. Hines Ward is the best blocking wide receiver in the modern NFL, who also happens to have 1,000 receptions, a Super Bowl MVP, and one of the clutchest third down wide receivers of his era. Hines wasn't a flashy player, but what he did contribute to winning games. The dirty work digging out safety, sealing a linebacker or defensive end. Willie's 75-yard Super Bowl run doesn't happen without Hines' block. Hines not being in the Hall of Fame is criminal, but worse that 2 guys who know football as good as you two just gloss over his greatness as a football player because he wasn't top 5 wide receiver in his era, while not talking about the fact that he was the best football player at wide receiver of his era. So evidently we don't put any stock into blocking wide receivers.
And maybe that's a little tongue-in-cheek.
And here we go with us, quote-unquote, I guess, dissing Hines Ward and not thinking that he'll get into the Pro Football Hall of Fame.
Well, I think we're still right about that based on all the evidence so far of Ward not really getting that close and kind of being stagnant and stuck. I mean, listen, I value run blocking, obviously. I just don't think that is going to get you in the Hall of Fame because you were a great run blocker as a wide receiver. I love that. I love watching the old highlights of it and crackback blocks and stuff like that. But I mean, you guys know where I stand on that. To the point is where you were top 5 receiver at your position. You can try to say was a top 5 football player at his position. Either you're a top 5 receiver or you're not. And generally speaking, he wasn't, not for a prolonged stretch of time, which is my kind of, base criteria for whether or not you're going to get in the Hall of Fame. So, if I'm wrong, I'm happy to be wrong about that. But all I'm saying is there's a reason why this guy has not gotten that close to the Hall of Fame, not being a finalist. And I think that trend will continue.
Jay Smith, you guys, all you people listen, you need more people like Alex Kozora actually being Hall of Fame voters than you do the Peter Kings, because Alex would pay more mind to the fact that more than just catches and more than just touchdowns and more than just, kind of the other things. But the fact of the matter is, whoever it is, if they're not on the Pittsburgh side of things and being the one presenting Hines Ward in his case, I tell you what, if there was anybody that you would want on that committee presenting Hines Ward's case to be in the Pro Football Hall of Fame, I think you'd want Alex doing it.
Yeah, I think I can make a case. Certainly there's an argument to be made there, but you have to lay it out in a way that, because receiver is such a stat heavy world, and I get Ward has good aggregate stats overall, but that it's getting so much more competitive in this day and age with all these more modern receivers getting in. You can make a case for it, but you have to make the right case for Hines Ward.
And look, you never know how we're, at some point throughout, the future here, once they work through some of these, this kind of wide receiver log jam, if you will. And who knows, maybe at some point they'll let in more than 5, modern era guys at a time. But the way it's that, is there a chance that Hines Ward gets into the Pro Football Hall of Fame at some point? I think the answer is yes. But if it does happen, I have a feeling that we might be waiting a long time for it.
I'm telling you, Dave, it's going to be Veterans Committee. It's going to be the old timers like me when I become an old timer and talk about the days of these receivers back in my day. They block their butt off. These receivers, they don't, all that kind of stuff. And that's the way
but we appreciate that stuff. It's just that Jay Smith's trying to say, it's funny to see Alex talk about these, Coach Jackson and all this, and then he turns around and said we don't put stock into it, which is. Well,
I think he's being a little jokey. I think
okay. I hope he is, because we pick this stuff out and film all the time during the season and all.
Yeah, I mean, again, we love the value of that, and there's certainly a ton of value. And these Steelers receivers, they better block better with the run game this year. They need to. But is that going to put those guys in the Canton, Ohio? I don't think it will. I think that's been proven based on how short he's fallen, Ward has, every single season.
I mean, look, he's once again, very good wide receiver, but for his era at the time, and that's how he's going to be measured. People are not just going to run the Keith Rivers and the Ed Reed clip over and over again. Well,
I think it's not even about the era at his time, but the era in which he'll be competing with going forward, which is the more modern, where the receiver numbers jump up, even more than what Hines Ward ever did. And that's just tough to compete with when you got guys with 1,500-yard receiving seasons and have crazy numbers, and then Ward's look, mediocre by comparison.
All right, so that's our scolding. Anything else to add to it?
I love Hines Ward, and I'm excited
I get it. I would love to see him go in,
Like, I go back and I watch, the old NFL Network top 10, I think Steelers or whatever the category was. And I love watching the old Hines Ward highlights. They're fantastic. It's just, I don't think he's going to get in the Hall of Fame, nor do I. And I'm okay with it. So that's my stance. I'm sticking with it.
All right. Anything else? I think we got through some questions here. You and I will be back several hours from now, recapping the Monday practice at Latrobe Memorial Stadium, and try to get that wrapped up in 30 minutes as well too. Alex, do you have a girlfriend now?
So why are you gonna ask me that here at the end of the show? we're I don't know. Well, we're to be determined.
To be determined. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. In the meantime, you can follow me on Twitter at Steelers Depot. Follow Alex on Twitter at Alex_Kozora. Follow the show at Terrible Podcast. Email the show, theterriblepodcast@gmail.com. You like what we do and want to donate to the cause, SteelersDepot.com. Hit the donate button. Also, if you want an ad-free version, SteelersDepot.com. Hit the ad-free button, upper right navigational bar. Once again, Alex will be hopefully the weather. What's the weather forecast? Rain?
Rain. Why not? It's been raining every day. It's going to rain probably today. It's actually said just specifically like 3:00 it's going to rain, which is exactly when practice has happened.
All right,
so
take a towel. Take a towel. Take your waterproof paper. Take your. Did you find your waterproof pen?
I did not, but Dr. Mel let me borrow one, so I appreciate that.
Okay.
And then I literally had to buy another pen, and I'm buying more paper because that's how much I'm using it this year.
All
so that kind of describes how much rain there has been. But we'll be there.
All right, keep up the good work, Alex. I enjoy it, and we'll have a thread going or a post going. Obviously, kind of tracking everything that happens during practice and those kind of things, and wrap it up throughout the afternoon with whatever interviews come in from the media outlets. So, in the meantime, as always, thanks for listening to the Terrible Podcast with Dave and Alex.